Welcome to a walk in the park with animal friends. Today we've got Ed from WDC, Whale and Dolphin Conservation. Welcome, Ed.
Hello, thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, no, it's great to see you here, and Skye is off already. So, Ed, you've brought a little one in with you today. Who have we got here?
I have. So this is Beans. We've had Beans for just coming up for a year and a half now.
Yep.
She's a rescue. We think she's a cross between a pug and a French bulldog, but you're never really sure with a rescue what they are.
Well, she's gorgeous. That's what she is.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's lovely to be able to bring her in, and she seems very happy here.
And why is she called Beans?
Because she is full of beans. She's got lots of energy. We had a pug before, actually called Pug, who was our best friend, best dog in the world. All dogs are the best dog in the world, but she was the best dog in the world. But she was 16 and didn't have much energy. So when we got Beans, it was a complete flip of what we were used to.
I can imagine.
So she's full of beans, and the name stuck.
Well, that's lovely. It's not a windy problem, so we're all good.
No, not a windy problem.
So let's just kick off. Do you want to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ed Goodall, and I work for Whale and Dolphin Conservation, which I'll probably refer to as WDC.
Yes, much easier.
And I'm our Head of Intergovernmental Engagement, which is a long job title
that is a very long job title.
Explanation. So, I basically lead all of our international policy engagement work at a high level to influence countries to change their laws and their regulations and their policies to basically benefit whales and dolphins to help restore their populations around the world.
That is an amazing job. But what sparked your interest for whales and dolphins in the first place? Before we get into the nitty-gritty, why whales and dolphins?
Well, I've always loved all nature, really. Mm-hmm. I grew up on the Isle of Wight off the south coast of the UK, so I was surrounded by the ocean. I was always in rock pools, catching crabs and looking at anemones and just fascinated by everything. And then I went away to university and studied environmental science.
Okay.
I worked my way through a few sort of different conservation jobs. I worked doing ancient woodland conservation for a while at the Woodland Trust, which was great. But then this job came up at Well and Dolphin Conservation, which was all about how whales and dolphins influence climate change and how they can be a positive factor in helping us tackle the climate crisis. And that was something I didn't really know about. And I thought, I should know about that. So I applied for the job because, who doesn't love whales and dolphins? They're incredibly fascinating creatures. And I got it. And it was kind of like coming home because it was an ocean job and I grew up surrounded by the ocean.
Yeah.
And it just feels like I found the perfect place to be.
Amazing. And they always say if you find a job that you love, you'll never work a day in your life, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why was Whale and Dolphin set up in the first place?
So we were set up in the late 80s, just after the moratorium on commercial whaling came into force in 1986, which was a really long battle to get that to come into force, really from the 60s and 70s. And then it was basically set up by a chap in his parents' house, in his bedroom, and he set up a newsletter and was just kind of getting the word out there about the moratorium and how important it was to conserve whales and giving the world more information about what was happening, because there wasn't really a charity that was focused specifically on whales and dolphins and fighting for their cause. So he set up what was then called Whale and Dolphin Conservation Society.
Yeah.
And it just grew rapidly over the years. And now we've got around about 70 or 80 people who work for us around the world.
That's amazing. So what are the biggest challenges that WDC is facing today?
Well, there's lots of challenges. Humans are having a multifaceted impact on our environment, our ocean environment, all around the world. And I always say that the list of things affecting whales and dolphins is as depressing as it is long, because there's just so many things going on that they haven't got used to and they can't really get used to. So I mean, there's the direct harms to whales and dolphins, things that we are kind of intentionally doing. So that's whaling, which is still going on. Commercial whaling is despite the moratorium coming into force, there's countries that have taken reservations to that, which means that they are permitted to go and hunt whales.
Yeah.
It's still only Iceland, Norway and Japan that are doing that commercially. So we're always fighting to reduce those quotas and putting pressures on those countries to bring that practice to an end, because it just doesn't really fit in the 21st century anymore. And there is a lot of subsistence hunting of whales as well, but it's more focused on the smaller cetaceans and the dolphins, narwhal, beluga, species like that. And actually, around about 100,000 of them are killed around the world every year for people to eat. And in some cases, they genuinely need that because they're indigenous people living far from, a supermarket. And they've lived in that way for thousands and thousands of years. Yeah. But there's other people that are just, they don't need to eat whale and dolphins. No. It's a choice, an active choice. And then the other direct harm is the captivity industry, because we know that we can't provide for whales or dolphins or orca, it's the largest species that's kept in captivity. We simply cannot provide for them in a captive situation. So we're always working to, she's grabbed those treats. I thought they were safe. So yeah, we're always working to really help that industry transition and bring it to an end. Because whales and dolphins have a whole ocean to swim in. There's no barriers to them. So living in a tank is just not possible for them.
No, I agree. So we'll pick up on that in a little while. Sure. Where I really wanted to start focusing in on is the impact that whales have on the climate. So can you explain to our listeners how a whale can contribute to the balance of our climate?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, it was first postulated, I think, in the 1980s by one of the best whale scientists that's ever lived, Hal Whitehead. And he was talking about how whales are helping to move nutrients around in the ocean ecosystem. And, they're the biggest creatures that have ever lived. So it's, or some of them. And so it's logical to assume that they're having quite a large impact within the ecosystem by doing what they do. I mean, we're quite a small species, but look at how we've but look at how we've kind of engineered the world, and that's how we talk about whales in there, that they are ecosystem engineers. So they're affecting their own environment, but actually for their own benefit. And just like us, they are carbon-based life forms. Which means that within their cells and their tissues and their bones, they have a lot of carbon, just in the same way that a tree does. And if that carbon is not in the atmosphere in the form of carbon dioxide, then that's good, because it means it's not contributing to the atmosphere and the climate heating up.
And surely at that size, they can hold a lot of carbon.
Yeah, so an adult blue whale can store within itself the equivalent of around about 825 trees worth of carbon.
Okay, so a blue whale is essentially a 825 swimming rainforest.
Yeah, you could say that.
Lovely.
Yeah. And then, so they accumulate that on their bodies over the course of their lifetime. And then when they die, hopefully at the end of a long, stress-free life.
How long do they typically live for?
A blue whale, I think it's around about 80 to 90 years.
Okay.
Yeah, hopefully at the end of a long, happy, stress-free life, they die, as we all do, and then they generally tend to sink to the bottom of the ocean. So all of that carbon that they've stored on their body actually sinks to the depths, to the deep sea, where that we can consider that carbon sequestered and locked away out of the atmosphere, much like it is in soils and rainforests and forests. That carbon's locked away, which is excellent. That's what we need. And at the same time, they're amazing deep sea oases of life, because they provide this huge delivery of energy to the deep sea. And we know that around about 200 species have been found specifically only living on what we call these whale falls at the bottom of the sea.
Okay.
So they're incredible for locking away carbon, but also for biodiversity as well. And that's not the only thing. So the whale falls, taking carbon down into the deep sea is really helpful. But as they're feeding during their feeding seasons, during the summer, they eat a lot of very small creatures, so they things like krill, herring, smaller fish, and they usually feed on that at depth. But they have to come to the surface to breathe because they're mammals like us.
Yep.
And then at the surface, in scientific terms, we say that they release enormous fecal plumes. That is actually just a gigantic poo.
Gigantic poo cloud, okay.
Gigantic
on
poo
it,
cloud.
yep.
And then that's because it's all of that fish has been digested, it's broken it down into its component parts, and they're releasing things like nitrogen and iron and phosphorus into the ocean. And then that is available for phytoplankton, which are tiny marine plants, but they work just in the same way that trees do, and they are all around the world. And I think, when we look at the ocean, we always kind of think that it's blue, and it is blue, but actually if you look at it a lot of the time, it's kind of green.
Yeah.
And that's because of the phytoplankton that are living there, and they are delivering oxygen for all of the life in the ocean to breathe, but they're also photosynthesizing, just like plants, and locking that dissolved carbon from the atmosphere into their cells. And then zooplankton, which are tiny marine animals, eat the phytoplankton, small fish eat the zooplankton, and then it becomes part of the food chain, and that carbon is locked away in the food chain, and eventually some of that carbon will end up in the deep sea and locked away in the same way as the whale fall. So it's taking that carbon out of the atmosphere and locking it away is an amazing thing that whales are doing that we've only really started to learn about in the last 10 or 12 years.
So, Ed, we were talking about that whales are essentially like swimming rainforests. Is there something else that people can liken them to? Yeah,
I think so. So there's lots of things in the natural environment that are really important for the functioning of life on Earth. I mean, it really is the life on the planet that has given rise to the climate that humans have thrived in and blossomed as a species. But we focus on some things which we can understand, and they're taught in school. So rainforests, obviously, something that we all know we need to save. We need to stop destruction of the Amazon. And now we know bees are really important for pollination, and they keep our food system going. So whales are actually doing some really important stuff too. So what we need to do is for people to start thinking about whales and dolphins like the same way that they think of trees and bees, because they are integral components of the global ecosystem that keep it functioning. And without them, the world is just less rich. Whales and dolphins are just like trees and bees and just have the same level of importance.
Which is amazing, because actually in last season we had the Bumblebee Conservation Trust come on and talk about the importance of bees to the environment. So it's great that to also then be able to see not just these land-winged heroes, but also our sea heroes that are helping to drive change as well. So we've talked about the blue whale and the biggest mammal in the world. Is that still true today?
Well, yeah, actually, a very recent discovery was what is believed to be the world's heaviest ever animal called Pericetus colossus, which was found off the coast of Peru.
Well, that's quite an epic name.
Yes, I think actually we're still on the Latin name for it. It's not been given a friendly common name yet. But yeah, found to be probably heavier than a blue whale, so therefore the biggest creature that has ever lived. So we're going to have to rewrite quizzes and everything, because everybody has always thought that the blue whale is the biggest creature on the planet. But that's the beauty of science, is that we're always finding out new stuff and having to rewrite things after what we find. So yeah, there's still so much to learn about the ocean and the environment more widely.
Yeah, which is amazing, because you can get all of your fact knowledge here, not just on the blue whale, and I won't even attempt to pronounce the Latin name of the new one that's been found, but also on whales and dolphins in general and what they can do. So hopefully at some point in a pub quiz in the future, we'll hear about the whale pump and what that's doing for the environment, let alone this new find.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. We at Animal Friends, we've been part of the Climate Giant project since it began, because it's absolutely fascinating. But if other businesses wanted to get involved, how would they get involved in this project?
Yeah, so Climate Giants is our way for any business to partner with WDC to help make our work happen in this area, and that involves a lot of science and research that we need to do. It helps fund our ability to go to big conferences and push for changes off the back of this information. And yeah, we accept partners on all scales, from tiny little startup businesses to big corporations and people like Animal Friends as well. And, you know, we're so grateful for the support of Animal Friends over the years, particularly for the Climate Giant program, because it's just helped us take off. So if anybody that is interested in becoming part of our Climate Giant project, just contact our partnerships team at WDC, which I think is partnerships@whales.org.
Fabulous. And for listeners out there that aren't part of businesses that look at doing this, obviously, Save the Whales, Save the World. There are T-shirts and all kinds of stuff available on your website. Not that I'm selling these, but they are pretty cool. Right, so back to some of the key things. So July this year, we saw that 55 pilot whales were stranded on a Scottish beach. Apparently, they were trying to help one of the females of their pod. So do they always travel in pods? Are they loyal to others? Do we know what happened with those?
Yeah, so whales are, you know, there's lots of different species of whales, and some of them are a lot more social than others. We know that all whale species, cetacean species, are incredibly intelligent. And I think that's one of the reasons why we identify with them so much, because we can kind of see ourselves in them. But pilot whales in particular are incredibly social, and they have very, very strong family bonds. Yeah. And they're one of the species that unfortunately does strand a lot, because if there is one individual in that pod, and some of these pods can be hundreds of individuals, if there's one that's struggling, they all want to help and they don't want to leave them alone. So if one animal goes onto the beach, unfortunately the rest of them join them, because they just don't want to leave them in distress. And you can see huge amounts of deaths from this, as happened in Scotland. But we do have incredible support programs and strandings networks around the world that try to help when whales strand, which is an incredibly, I mean, I take my hats off to these people. It's incredibly emotionally draining and stressful trying to get these huge, and you know, you can really look into their eye and you can feel their pain and their suffering. But sometimes they do manage to refloat them and get them back out to sea. But yeah, pilot whales in particular, they're so connected to each other and they travel in pods, and it's the matriarchs in those pods that teach them where to go, how to feed, and they hold all of that knowledge for that population that keeps them going. So yeah, it can be very sad.
So that's talking about some of the natural dangers for them. But even if we just think about Scotland, I think one of the biggest dangers around the coast of Scotland for whales is discarded fishing gear. Are you finding that a big problem still? Yeah,
so I mean, whales and dolphins have evolved to live in an ocean free from things that they can get entangled in. And they're very inquisitive a lot of the time. So they want to find out what things are, and they're really interested in them. But leaving things in the ocean that are, they don't degrade, it's a really big problem for whales and dolphins getting entangled in live fishing gear. The industrial size of a lot of the fishing operations that we see now, it's just huge. So it's not just discarded fishing gear, it's live fishing gear. I mean, there's long lines, there's gill nets that people leave out for days on end, lobster pots with lots of lines and ropes that are in the water that are an entanglement risk. And a lot of the time, whales just can't escape them. The discarded gear is a problem as well, but it's, there's so many issues within fishing that cause issues for whales and dolphins. It's a really big problem, yeah.
And it's not just off the coast of Scotland, that's globally.
Absolutely, yeah, all around the world. I mean, the rise of plastics, that's what these nets are made out of, is plastics, which take hundreds of years to degrade. And so if a whale becomes entangled, you know, that plastic, that rope can just get tighter and tighter and cut into their skin, and it can be, most of the time results in long, painful deaths and long-term injuries. So it's something that we work on a lot, and it's something that we need people to be conscious of and thinking about with their consumer behaviours as well, to help tackle that problem.
So as part of that, is there, you know, things that you can buy? What are the labels that people need to look for when it comes to, because you can see like dolphin safe tuna and stuff like that. Is that a thing? Do they really help towards these problems?
Yeah, so there are big certification programs, but they're definitely not perfect. I mean, there's a lot of illegal, unregulated and unreported fishing that goes around the world, and you know, we're at the moment in particular, we're in a cost of living crisis and people are struggling to make ends meet, so people are buying cheaper food, and generally the less you're paying, the less sure you should be about where that product is coming from. So yeah, check labels. There are things like the Good Fish Guide to ensure that you're not depleting populations of
Beans is wrecking the studio.
Yeah, just want to make sure she's not destroying anything over there.
Oh, don't worry. Skye causes far more havoc, and she's already turned the light off over here.
Come here. She's just having all the attention.
They say never work with dogs or children, or animals and children.
But... Oh, definitely work with animals. Come on.
Oh, treats are a winner. So if we go from Scotland to somewhere much further away, so can you tell us what your space whale project is?
I can. So yes, space whale it's kind of like one of those projects that sounds crazy, but it's really amazing. And we're living in a world now where there's so much technology, and thankfully now people are looking to put technology to use to save the world and save the whale, as you said. So we actually put out a challenge as part of it's called the Gravity Challenge. It's something that Deloitte run, and they're one of our partners as well. And it's to help encourage space technology startups to basically solve challenges for all sorts of people. So we entered a challenge into that competition that asked whether we can count whales from space.
Amazing.
And it turns out that we can. So we're working with a company in Germany called BioConsult, and they've developed this project called Space Whale. So what they do is they use very high resolution satellite imagery, which is captured all the time from the array of satellites that we've got flying around just above our heads right now. And using artificial intelligence, they're able to identify if the conditions are calm enough, whales at the surface of the ocean. They can even tell what species they are, whether it's an adult, whether it's a calf, and that is absolutely revolutionary, because we've been counting whales for a long time, but from boats. With people with binoculars and clipboards, and that's something that will never be replaced, because it gives you kind of a different quality of data. But what Space Whale does is it allows us to work in whole areas of the ocean that we're unable to get to on a regular basis. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We're looking into some really remote areas of the ocean which have never really been surveyed for their whales, and we hope to find records of species that we didn't know were there, which is amazing, because then that helps us to inform marine protected areas and pushing for them to be designated, and the associated, conservation interventions and management interventions that are required in those areas to look after those populations and make sure that they are thriving into the future. Because what we don't know, we can't protect, and that's what's amazing about Space Whale.
And have you identified anything new as of yet?
So we're still processing a lot of the data at the moment, but one of the amazing things about Space Whale is that there was a pilot study done in New Zealand which actually captured some imagery on the same day that a set of scientists were out doing a boat-based survey to kind of just test the reliability of it.
Okay.
And it came out with the exact same number of whales.
Amazing.
Which is incredibly amazing. I think it was southern right whales they were looking at over there. And that just really gives us the confidence that we're able to use this technology to inform conservation, which is just, it's so exciting.
Yeah, because I am assuming if you can identify patterns and paths that they take, you could look at negotiating with shipping companies if it crosses shipping lanes, because boat strikes are another key danger for whales and dolphins.
Absolutely, as well, yeah. I mean, whales and dolphins get hit by all sorts of boats, from small pleasure craft right up to enormous industrial commercial shipping containers. And those boats, most of the time, have no idea that they've hit a whale because they're so big.
Yeah.
And so us understanding how many whales get hit by boats is really, really difficult to understand because most of the whales, I mean, occasionally they'll wash up on shore and we're able to do an I would never get this word right. necropsy on the whale and understand what killed it. And a lot of the time it's kind of a blunt force trauma, or there's evidence that it's been hit by a propeller.
Yeah.
But most of them, as we talked about with the whale fall, they sink to the bottom of the ocean, so we don't understand what's killed them. But yeah, you're absolutely right. So shipping lanes can be moved. And they have been moved just recently off the coast of Sri Lanka to protect the blue whales and the sperm whales that are resident species around there. But just by moving a shipping lane a few miles, you can have a huge impact and reduce the likelihood of a collision. I think it's up to about 80 or 90%, which is incredible.
Yeah, because their migratory patterns tend to be the same each year and each time of year. So having that data and being able to present that to companies has got to be really powerful.
Yeah, exactly. And companies are starting to understand now that they need to do things not just in terms of climate and their emissions, but also to understand their impact on the natural world and do something to counter that. So we're hoping that examples like this kind of open people's eyes to the need to be changing shipping lanes, but also kind of reducing the amount of things that we're needing to ship, because we definitely live in a consumerist society now.
Yeah.
We're always taking more than we're giving back. Just recently we passed Earth's overshoot day for the year, which means that we've taken more resources from the earth than it's able to give back to us. So we need to start reducing dramatically the amount of stuff we're using. And then that would also reduce the amount of shipping traffic that there is, because I think it's something like 80% of our goods in the UK arrive here by ship. So if we weren't using those goods, or we were reusing our things and being a lot more conscious about that, then there would be less ships in the ocean that are able to hit whales. So it's not just moving the shipping lanes, it's trying to reduce that traffic as well.
Yeah, very good point. So will you be talking about space whale at COP28?
Yes, we will. Our space whale colleagues will be there, which will be great. I mean, COP28 is certainly going to be a crazy circus. The climate COPs always are. I think there's around about 2,300 NGOs that are going to be there.
Wow.
So it is a crazy time, and COPs move around every single year. So we're in the process now in August of planning our events and our engagement over there. But with so many organisations and governments attending, it's just crazy time at the moment. Beans, do you want to come here? Beans, what's this? Just licking that juice box over there. You sit down. Sit down.
So with going there, will there be anything that we can do around the grind? So do you want to tell listeners what the grind is, why it happens, where it happens?
Yeah, so the grind is it's a drive hunt of small cetaceans. So it's usually pilot whales, but they do take other dolphin species as well. They took, I think, 1,400 Atlantic white-sided dolphins the year before last, which was very sad. So it's in the Faroe Islands, which comes under the remit of the government of Denmark. And the Faroe Islands, if you don't know where they are, they're kind of off the coast of the UK, really.
I couldn't believe how close they were to the UK. Realistically, I mean, I think they're a few hundred miles just off the coast of Scotland.
Yes. Yeah.
And this happens every year.
Yeah, and it's there was actually a cruise ship that was there a few weeks ago that pulled into the port at the same time the grind was happening. And so these tourists were seeing a large pod of pilot whales just be slaughtered right there on the beach, and the ocean turns red. So it's very distressing. And we already talked about pilot whales. They're incredibly social creatures, and the Faroese people, they have hunted pilot whales for hundreds of years, and they genuinely have records that go back centuries. And it's like we were talking a little bit about earlier around there's hunting commercially, and then there's something which we call Aboriginal subsistence whaling, which is where indigenous communities hunt whales or dolphins because they have a genuine need. But in the Faroe Islands, there is not a genuine need. I
was going to say, if they're hunting all of these, are they eating them? Is it for meat? Is that the primary reason, or is it sport?
Seeing some of the imagery, sometimes you might consider it to be sport. But primarily, the meat is shared amongst the local community. Some of it is sold, so there is a commercial aspect to it. It is available in shops and restaurants. And if you're hunting something and it's being sold, there is not a genuine need because you're exchanging money for a product there. There is not a need factor. And so we do not believe that there is a need for pilot whales or any other cetacean species to be hunted in the Faroes. They're a westernized set of islands. They have everything that they need diet-wise to not hunt whales and dolphins. And because whales and dolphins are at the top of the food chain, they're top predators, this process called bioaccumulation happens. And bioaccumulation is where chemicals or heavy metals get into the food chain. Mm-hmm. So humans have put these things into the ocean. They've come from antifouls on the bottom of boats. Things like lead were used for a long time. Things like mercury get into the water, and we use so many chemicals now that just end up being washed out to sea. And they get into plant life, then they get into small ocean life, they get into fish. The whales eat the fish, and because they're complex compounds and chemicals and elements, animals can't shed them. So if a pilot whale eats 10 fish and all of those fish have got a tiny little bit of mercury or something in, all of that mercury goes into the pilot whale. So
they just absorb it.
And they absorb it. And the only way for them to get rid of it usually is in their milk to their young. So unfortunately, a lot of the time, the calves are being poisoned by their own mother's milk through no fault of their own because of these chemicals that we've put into the environment.
Okay.
But that means that the meat as well is also toxic. And we've done testing over the years of samples, really from a human health perspective, because it's incredibly dangerous. I mean, what we found that the levels of toxins in this meat just far and above what is recommended for a safe ingestion of something like those chemicals or elements on a regular basis. So it's really from a human care perspective that we're encouraging people not to eat whales and dolphins, because who knows what conditions they can develop from ingesting these chemicals via the whale meat.
So you touched on earlier some of the other whaling nations, so Norway, Iceland, Japan. How is that scene developing? Because I believe there's been some recent wins in Iceland.
Yes. So, we had a huge win earlier on this year in Iceland. But right now, it's a very live situation. So we're in the middle of August right now. And the Minister for Fisheries and the Environment in Iceland actually banned whaling for part of the summer season, so up until the end of August, because they produced a report following the 2022 whaling season, and we were working with our partners Hard to Port, in Iceland at the whaling station last year to observe what was going on, because we know that there's a lot of pretty bad stuff that happens.
Yeah.
And so we actually, with the help of Anna at Hard to Port, uncovered that they were killing whales in a really poor way. If you're going to kill any animal, it needs to be instant, and that animal needs to have no awareness of what's going on. But unfortunately, we uncovered that some whales were being shot up to 4 times with explosive grenade harpoons and suffering for a really long time, up to 2 hours in some cases, until they died, which is just completely unacceptable. And the report that the Icelandic government commissioned said, yes, actually, this is completely unacceptable and we can't allow this to continue. So they put a pause on whaling up until the end of August. And we're working really, really hard at the moment to ensure that that pause is extended through to September and the end of the usual whaling season, so that no whales will die this year. And this is fin whales. This is the second largest creature on the planet right now. They're not small animals at all. And so they're actually in Iceland. They're given quotas of 5-year blocks to hunt whales, and they're told they can hunt this many whales per year. That's a whole other conversation. But this is the 5th year of their quota. So what we're hoping is that the government will not grant the last remaining whaling operation another quota, which would mean that hopefully that's the de facto end of whaling in Iceland after many, many years of fighting it. So it's not over yet, and there's powerful interests at work in Iceland. His name is Christian Loftsson. He's an incredibly rich and influential man in Iceland. And he owns the last whaling company in Iceland, Hvela. And he is doing everything he can to try and ensure that his boats can go out and hunt whales in a couple of weeks' time.
Well, hopefully we'll get a good decision on that, which will ban them, because I've been out to Iceland, and a lot of the boats that I've seen out there have actually turned to whale tourism to then help promote whales rather than hunt them. Can you tell us a bit about responsible tourism? Where's some of the best places to go and see whales in the world, but responsibly? And what are those things that people really need to look out for if they're going whale watching or whale encounters?
Yeah, so I think the first and foremost, the most important thing to say when people want to experience whales and dolphins is, please absolutely do not buy a ticket to go and see a whale and dolphin in captivity. If you go and see them, it just extends the viability of those industries and encourages them to stay open and not transition to a better future. So whales and dolphins are incredible creatures, and I've seen them. I believe you've seen them, Patricia. And, I think it's something that everybody, if they're able to, should go and see a whale and dolphin.
Well, as I was saying, when I went to Iceland, I went on a whale watching tour with a colleague of mine, actually, and we spent 3 hours on top of the boat watching for whales in about -20. So I literally just had my eyes out, and all I saw at that point was a dead fish. So you can't guarantee they're going to be there. I was so excited. Unfortunately, I haven't seen them. But yeah, it would be, I can imagine what an amazing sight it would be.
It absolutely is, and that's what we would recommend, obviously, is seeing them in the wild on their own terms, doing what they want to do. So obviously you can go and see them from a boat, but it's really important to ensure that you do your research and you make sure that you're going out with a reputable whale watching business that is following guidelines on keeping distance. So things like turning the engine off, keeping the recommended distance away from adults or further distance from mother and calf pairs, for example, and just allowing them to go about their natural lives as naturally as possible. Because just being in the water with them obviously can disturb them, because we're an alien in the ocean. So yeah, absolutely do your research. But there are plenty of great companies out there that have given hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people incredible experiences to go and witness these creatures. And I hope you do get to see one, Patricia, because it is just it's a life-changing experience.
Yeah.
I actually saw my first whales last month in Alaska.
Amazing.
Which was amazing. Maybe we can talk about that in a minute. But so yeah, just going back to seeing whales and dolphins. Yeah, you can see them from a boat, but also you can see them from land as well. And we have our Shore Watch program, which is live in Scotland at the moment, and it's the summertime, so there's lots of exciting things that people are seeing up there. People are seeing orcas, humpback whales, minke whales, Risso's dolphins, bottlenose dolphins.
All from the shore.
All from the shore.
Amazing.
So yeah, up in Scotland, if you're there, you can become a Shore Watch volunteer, and it's our citizen science program, which just allows you to go to specific points all around the Scottish coastline and just look out to sea with binoculars and just see what you can find, because you can absolutely see whales and dolphins from our shore in the UK, which not a lot of people know.
That's amazing. So just touching on the whole captivity piece thing. So I hate talking about this now, but 20 years ago, when I was a lot younger and not as aware of captivity and what it causes, I went swimming with dolphins in captivity. I kind of, to myself, I was like, it's an ocean enclosure, it's fine, these dolphins seem really happy. But looking back on it now, I feel really sad that I did that. I mean, it was great to be able to interact with them, but actually it was on my terms, it wasn't on their terms.
Well, yeah, as we talked about earlier, they're incredibly intelligent creatures, and they perceive the world in ways that we don't understand, because primarily they interact with their environment via sound and echolocation, and we can't understand what the world looks like. I mean, they have eyes and they have nose and they have mouths just like us, but they're incredibly sensory and they're incredibly emotional. And they're so inquisitive. So especially when they're in somewhere where they're not in the ocean, and then a human comes in, that's really exciting for that poor animal that's in there, because the vast majority of the time they've got nothing going on, and they're incredibly bored and they go crazy in there, because in the ocean they can swim everywhere. They can swim down hundreds of meters, east to west hundreds of meters. They can interact with fish, they play all the time, but in a tank they just haven't got that. So I think a lot of people, as you've done, they are very inquisitive, so they come up to you and they want to interact just because they're so bored and they just want something to do. You said obviously that you got into the water with them, and that's something that at WDC we really don't recommend that. Obviously in captivity, not at all. There are whale watching businesses that offer swim with experiences, but these are wild animals, and they're big. You think a dolphin is small. When you see a bottlenose dolphin, which is the species in captivity that are generally kept, they're really big animals, and if they want to, they can hurt you. And it's very stressful for them as well. A lot of boats go out and they drop people in the water, and they chase after a pod and they kick the tourists over the side, but then that's on the humans' terms. It's not on the dolphins' terms. And people have been swimming in the ocean not looking for them, and a dolphin's come up whilst they've been snorkeling, but that's on the dolphins' terms. And I suppose in that situation the key is just don't touch, right? Look, absolutely. Just keep your distance. Be calm and just let the dolphins or the whales do what they want to do. But really, we just encourage people not to seek out those direct interactions with whales and dolphins, because people have died. I can imagine, actually, because as over-friendly as this dolphin was being, it was huge and was quite scary at the time, because I was pinned essentially in a corner. But you're absolutely right. They're not small, and although they have this perception that dolphins are super friendly, they are wild creatures at the end of the day. Well, they're apex predators. They're the equivalent of lions or tigers of the ocean, and orca in particular. They're so intelligent, and some of the ecotypes they eat seals and sea lions. which are really physiologically quite similar to humans. So, and orcas, as you know, if you've seen things like blackfish, have killed humans in captivity, and so there's nothing to kind of say that they won't do that in any situation that you're next to a whale or a dolphin.
Yeah, because documentaries like that really started to help open up people's eyes about whales in captivity. How true are they, and how much of it might be sensationalism, or, you know, are there really those bigger challenges with having them in captivity?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, blackfish was the biggest one that came out around about 10 years ago now. Incredible documentary, and it's giving that visibility and that awareness for people of what's going on, because obviously there's a lot of very clever marketing that has happened from organisations like SeaWorld that play on the fact that, you know, whales and dolphins look happy and they're smiling and things like that. That's just the shape of their heads. They can't change the shape of their mouth, so they're always going to look happy, but actually they're not satisfied or stimulated at all in those environments. So blackfish obviously was a huge eye-opener for a lot of people, that showed the kind of not true nature of these animals, because they're not out there to harm or attack or kill humans. But what happens when you put an incredibly intelligent animal like that in a small space for decades, which some of these poor killer whales have been in the US and other places around the world, and they simply go mad. There's footage of them hitting their heads along on the side of the tanks just for something to do, which is just so sad. But really, something like blackfish is just the tip of the iceberg, because the organisations that have whales and dolphins in captivity, they don't want people to see the reality of what's going on. So it's incredibly difficult for people that are looking to investigate these places to get in there and expose it. So blackfish is really just the tip of the iceberg, and there's a lot more horrible stuff going on in captivity that the world hasn't seen yet. There are a lot of other documentaries out there that I'd encourage people to watch. One of the most important, I think, is drawing the link between hunting and captivity, because obviously any animal that is in captivity has originally come from the wild. And dolphins are still hunted from the wild, or captured from the wild, to go into captivity. And there's a great documentary from I think it's around about 2008 called The Cove. I don't know if you've seen that, but that's
I haven't actually. I'd
really recommend watching it. I mean, it's always challenging trying to get people to watch these things, because you know going into it it's going to be a really stressful watch. It's going to be really emotional. But I think it's really important for people to put yourself through that and understand what's happening, because if you don't fully understand, you can't ever fully interact with the issue and then talk about it with people and spread the message and make changes in your own life, because you can just ignore it. So The Cove is about Taiji, which is really a small rural settlement in Japan. But on a regular basis, they undertake these drive hunts. So several boats will go out into the ocean, and they will find basically whatever dolphins they can, and they will drive them into this cove, and then net it off so that dolphins can't escape. And some of those dolphins are selected for captivity, so the most attractive ones, and they're shipped off and then they're kept in tanks for the rest of their lives, or moved around various different places. Plucked
away from their families and taken away to be put on show somewhere.
And a lot of the time, those who aren't being taken to captivity, they just kill them. Sometimes it goes for meat, sometimes those animals are just left in the ocean and just died completely unnecessarily. So there is that strong link between hunting and captivity, those two direct harms that we talked about earlier on. I think it's really important for people to understand, because those animals that are in captivity have come from somewhere, and there's a story behind that. And Taiji is a big part of that story.
So when you're travelling, look out for places, the large aquariums that are offering dolphin shows, or orcas in captivity, and avoid them like the plague.
Yes, just don't buy a ticket, and just educate yourself about how stressful and depressing it is for these animals to live their lives in captivity. We simply can't provide for them. There are some species, plenty of species, that we can keep in captivity and give them stimulation, but whales and dolphins are just impossible to keep because they have 71% of the ocean that they can, or 71%, sorry, of the planet. That's what the ocean covers that they can go to. So if they so choose, and keeping them in a small tank. I mean, there's lots of aerial photographs of SeaWorld. You may have seen them where there's the aerial image of SeaWorld, the car park of SeaWorld, which is enormous, and then the tiny little tank that those orca have to live in that's right next to the ocean and their home and where their family and their pod still are.
It's crazy, isn't it? So moving to a little bit of a lighter note, coming towards the end of this podcast. So what's your favourite dolphin species?
Oh, my favourite dolphin species. I'm going to go with a strange one.
Okay.
There's whales and there's dolphins. Then there's things called oceanic dolphins.
Okay.
And there's a species called the Cuvier's beaked whale, which is actually quite big. It's very strange looking. It's got some very odd teeth. And it hunts incredibly deep in the ocean, beyond the depth of the Titanic. And just what they're experiencing and seeing down there, we can't even begin to understand. And I think that's just absolutely fascinating that a creature has evolved to exploit an ecosystem that, we're completely
we don't even know
exists.
Going
on down there.
Yeah. Oh, that is crazy. So on the flip side then, what's your favourite whale and why?
I think my favourite whale, although I've never seen one and I don't know if I ever will, but I think it's the bowhead whale, which is an Arctic species, very similar to the right whales. They're big, they're chunky, they've got a lot of blubber because they live in the ice pretty much all the time. But my favourite thing about them is that they can live up to 200 years old.
200 years old?
Yeah. There's no mammal on Earth that can live that long.
Crikey, is it the cold water? What?
Yeah, it could be a part of it. They just a slower pace of life up there in the Arctic. I don't think we really know exactly why they live to 200 years old, but we've found bowhead whales with stone spears still embedded in them because somebody has attempted to hunt them 150, 200 years ago, indigenous people, and the whale has escaped.
Yeah.
But the thing I like to think about with the bowhead whale is just what it's seen. An individual that's approaching the end of its life today, at the end of 200 years, that has seen incredible change in the ocean, and not nice change for a whale. And I think it's important for people to understand that there are creatures in the ocean, like bowhead whales, that remember an ocean before humans.
Yeah.
Before the industrialization of the ocean, before noise, before industrial fishing, before oil and gas exploration. They remember a pristine ocean environment where they had all the food that they needed, before commercial whaling, before all of that. And that's something that I talk about a lot is the concept of shifting baseline syndrome. Which is where what we see today and what we perceive around us, that's what we think has always been there because it's all we've experienced. So with a whale, it's on a completely different timescale. So, and I think it's really important that we recognize that and try to make the ocean a little bit more habitable and a little bit more friendly for those whales because, they grew up in this pristine environment. That's what they've naturally known, and then we've made it really stressful for them. And I think it's really our responsibility to give them a little bit more space, turn the volume down in the ocean, and just let them return to a bit more of what they perceive to be as normality.
Yeah. So you touched on Alaska, so let's just talk about that very quickly before we finish up. Was that your most magical encounter with a whale? And what did you see while you were out there? What were you doing?
I think it was, yeah. So I was visiting one of our research projects. So as part of our Climate Giant project, we're funding really important gaps in scientific knowledge about what whales and dolphins are doing in the ocean to help the climate. So we're funding some work at the University of Alaska Southeast, and I was out there visiting Dr. Heidi Pearson, who's leading that project, which is really investigating the population of humpback whales that come to feed in Juneau every summer, and quantifying how much of the nutrients that they're cycling and how much of the carbon that is coming from that via the phytoplankton, and as part of that process, because that's never been done before, actually testing the whale pump hypothesis in the field. So they're out there collecting water samples, whale poo samples, and testing it all in the lab so that we can actually put some numbers against these processes. Because as part of my job, the policy change respect of what we do at Well and Dolphin Conservation, we need data and we need numbers to convince people to change. Everything makes logical sense as to what they're doing, but we need science and data to back up what we're saying to actually make things happen. So I was out there visiting that project, and these whales, this population of North Pacific humpback whales, they spend the winter time in Hawaii, which is where they go to give birth and nurse their young and breed for the following year, and then they come to Alaska to feed in the summertime. And they're generally solitary animals, humpback whales. But in Juneau, they come together to undertake a behavior known as bubble net feeding, which is, if you haven't heard of it, it's where groups of them come together and a lead whale will dive down and they will release a slow stream of bubbles and bubbles and air from their blowhole, and they will kind of spin around slowly towards the surface, creating a net around a school of fish, and that concentrates that school of fish. And because fish are definitely not anywhere near as clever as whales, they think, oh, I can't go through those bubbles, so they're stuck there. And then the rest of the group of whales all come up all at the same time and gulp up that concentrated group of fish. And that was the first time I saw whales, was in the Alaskan in the Alaskan landscape with snow-capped mountains and glaciers, and then 12 or 13 humpback whales all emerging from the water at the same time. It was just like...
That's more than magical, that is.
Yeah, it was just absolutely incredible. Just that volume of biomass emerging from the... Oh, sorry, hit the mic there.
It's the excitement of it.
It's the excitement, that mass of biomass emerging from the water all at the same time. And then you can hear, like, the satisfaction of them. Some of the whales are like, they let their breath out, but, like, with a really satisfied kind of grunt. Because they've just got a great big mouthful of food and they're really happy and content. And it was just magical. And they're doing that over and over and over again to fatten themselves up for their migration back to Hawaii.
Oh, I wish I was there. That sounds amazing.
It was.
Ed, we have covered so much today. It's been absolutely fascinating. Just one last question. If there is one thing out of today's podcast that you want listeners to really take away with them with regards to whales and dolphins, what is that key thing that you want them to take away?
Oh, it's always difficult to pick one.
I know. There's so many.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about never buying a ticket. I think that's really important. I think it's really important for people to educate themselves and be open to exploring things that, you know, are difficult to take on board, because understanding what's happening in the environment, and particularly to creatures like whales and dolphins, it's really stressful. Some of the things that are happening are stressful and depressing to put ourselves through. But when we do that and we gain that awareness, then that actually translates into positive changes in our own lives, that then translate into positive changes in the ocean for whales and dolphins, to make the ocean more habitable and more friendly for them. So, I think educate yourselves, talk about it, talk to everybody. If you know someone that's going to Florida, talk to them about SeaWorld and tell them not to buy a ticket. And how to interact with whales on their own terms, and go out with responsible whale watching companies and
Yeah, because you're absolutely right. The education part is the key piece, because the more people that understand the challenges and the more that you share that information, especially on the Climate Giant project as an example, I tell everyone that I meet, I can shoehorn into any conversation about how important whales are for the climate, and people just have no clue that they deliver so much from a climate perspective. And everyone always talks rainforests, but actually we've got these amazing creatures swimming around that do so much, and people just haven't heard about it. So don't hesitate to also share that fact is my key bit. But thank you so much for coming in today, Ed, and having a walk in the park with us at Animal Friends. It's been amazing to see you, and thank you for all the work that you and WDC do. It truly is amazing. So if you get the chance, go on and have a look at the WDC website. There's a huge amount of content and information on there. It's a great place to start. But thanks, Ed. No,
thank you, Patricia, and thank you to everyone at Animal Friends for all of the support that you've given us over the years. We couldn't do what we do without, the like-minded support of Animal Friends and other organisations and people like yourself. So we're so grateful. Thank you so much for having me in today. It's been a pleasure.
No, it's our pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of our listeners. You can find out news about our podcast on our Instagram or TikTok handles, which is at Animal Friends Insurance, or on our Facebook page at Animal Friends Pet Insurance.